I go cleaning windows to earn an honest bob. For a nosy Parker, it's an interesting job.
Welcome back, dear friends. I've been very, very busy. Also got an order for one of the 3D printed iridescent Krakens with the lovely black shiny eyes. And I noticed I'd advertised it on the Etsy shop as being copper or brass, but only had pictures of copper ones. So I've printed a brass one. So beautiful it looks. Lovely effect with a iridescent metallic filament. Whilst I'm waiting for my wife to get better or my daughter to be persuaded to do the singing, finally going to get round. This was the filter that I've built to turn the signal from the microphone for tuning into a signal that could be read by the Arduino to read the frequency. So I'm going to get that put onto a piece of this lovely Vera board. I always call it Vera board, it's one company, but here's this thing I remember because I couldn't get this for love nor money with a slot cut up the middle, because it basically models the breadboard. That's the sort of breadboard I used in the Nemnet Throbwell kitchen timer kit to save people having to have a soldering iron, yet still to be able to put together their very own electronic circuit. And there we have it. Lovely. So nice using Vera board. I also forgot to mention the elephant in the room, or in this case, beautiful table. I just got so sick. It was, as I've said before, the workshop's not very big. Having this huge ukulele machine that would sit in the spray booth, or if I wanted to spray something, I'd have to move it onto the top of the laser cutter. If I wanted to laser cut something, I'd have to sit it on the workbench. What a pain. So this is absolutely fantastic. I'm not going to get it cluttered underneath, but it's got to the stage where I'm carrying something along thinking subconsciously, where am I going to put it? Oh, and I put it down here, and it's exciting. Who would have thought a flat surface would be exciting? I suppose people who like making flat surfaces. Anyway, I have just realised before I solder this little board on, I have this floating around. The microphone, which I never actually sorted out how I was going to mount. When I was fiddling around experimenting with the auto-tuning thing, reading frequencies, the only place I could get it to work was either hovering over here, which means you can't see even less of the ukulele, or inside. Oh, and by the way, thanks to all of you who wrote comments about where you thought this should go. Like I say, I've tried it all over the place and it really did have quite a big impact. So thanks again for all your suggestions. I'm not using a tripod, I should, but it's just such a faff. I'm stuck in here. Virtually no room now with the table. So you'll have to put up with handheld. Look at that. Beautiful. I'll drill a couple of holes and tap them. And the reason it needs to be 4.1 is because the tube is 4. Like I say, that just slips on. It's a fraction of slop, but virtually nothing. It just means it fits together. How lovely. I finally managed to get the hole drilled through, several attempts. I've got that glued in. Any excuse. We've solved the problem by turning something out of brass. What a joy! It's got a hole for the electric microphone to fit in. A grub screw, obviously. Got to have a grub screw. I could have glued or soldered it, but you know. And then I've bent it all so it fits a treat. Let me show you. There we have it. Well, I'm very pleased with that. Just tightens in here and it doesn't touch anything and it just sits fairly close to the strings, which I think will be fine. It doesn't get in the way of it, doesn't cover up any more of the ukulele. I think, and it also looks nice, which is the main thing, and could be some sort of Victorian type thing. Golden Bennett, what a palaver. I thought, yes, just solder this onto there, that'll be fine, because it's all grounded then. Right, the moment of truth. Microphone, pipe, soldered on. So now forget about the rest of it. 5 volts, 54 very best of voltaires into it. Let's switch it on and see what happens. But we don't have a flashing light when we tap it. Sod it. Arg! I don't know where we are now. I think the first part of this video was the second part of the previous video because it was getting too long. My wife, thankfully, is now better. She's recovered from COVID, which was horrible. So she has actually managed to record the lyrics, which is brilliant. Wasn't as simple as all that, of course. Let me explain. Nothing is ever simple, but simple is boring. So in the end, I think I may have even mentioned this 9 days ago when I was doing the last video, I recorded the Ukulele Machine playing its version. So let's just listen to that. Make sure I'm right. Yes. So that's what that's doing. Then I added, and I was thrilled about this, the original recording from George Formby with an orchestra and everything over the top, just to check that everything lined up. Right, and I was absolutely thrilled.
Now I go cleaning windows to earn an honest bob.
Outstanding, excellent. And again, she sang along to this, which should be completely perfect timing until I dropped her recording on and found that the timing just wandered all over the place, bless her. So this is what it'll sound like. I'll just start it where she starts singing.
Now I go cleaning windows to earn an honest bob. For a nosy Parker, it's an interesting job.
You get the idea. Now, I haven't fiddled with this because the idea, the fantastic idea, notice the idea, not the practice, is to then record this as a WAV file, which I have done, and then put it in the Teensy, the wonderful Teensy, which I devised or developed while I was, or learnt how to use rather, while I was developing Victoria the Automaton. As I say, life is never simple. The Teensy is under there. The Teensy soundboard is on the top, which has an SD slot in it, so I can record somewhere to record the WAV files. Now, a few years back, I got Victoria the Automaton to do a nice little Christmas message.
Dearest friends and family, welcome. My name is Victoria the Automaton, and I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you all a very happy Christmas and a safe and felicitous New Year.
I didn't worry about her moving and everything. Other than her mouth, I just recorded a Christmas message on here, and it processed it, added wow and flutter, added noise, crackles, hiss, all the rest of it. Sounded brilliant. This time, obviously, despite all this having just been sitting in a box for a year or two, I cannot get the Teensy to play any sort of audio file. I just cannot. I've looked at the sketches and everything else. There is absolutely no reason why it shouldn't work. I've even gone to the trouble of sort of disconnecting all the other bits and pieces from it just to sort of slowly go back to a basic Teensy, wanting to try and play an audio. Anyway, during the meanwhilest, obviously, never a dull moment, I have been making another one of these climatic revelators for a lovely client, a customer in America who has ordered one of every one of my machines practically. It's absolutely amazing. Look, spinny. As you know, I do like spinny things. And if I hold this up to the light, lovely spinny things with bearings. You can see there are the little weather scenes. Slow down. There we are. Little weather scenes, 5 of them, to indicate the weather. They'll be backlit. It is so nice having destructions for a start, copious destructions. Very pleased about that. I add to them each time I make another one actually, and also come up with better ways of doing things each time, which is great. Next job for me to do, I think I'm going to start on the tensioner that goes here. Oh, and the motor and the switch. Oh, and also, look what arrived this very morrow. We have an Arduino Uno, a proper one, obviously, not some horrible rip-off. That is for that, and this Arduino Mega is for the chronological engine, which he has also ordered. And what's more, 20 quid of anyone's money, well spent money or well earned money. This thing, this is one of those amazing little PIR sensors. Normally I use one of the larger ones in my machines, but I realised after I'd done this and changed my mind about sharing a PR sensor between several machines that I needed to have some sort of PR sensor. These are 20 quids if you get them from Farnell Electronics in the UK. If, however, you get them from RS in the UK, they cost £29.50. Lovely. No good reason at all. They're made by Panasonic, and the number is... hang on a minute, just rifle through the rubbish. It is manufacturer part number AMN 11111. They do like their ones. It is actually because you can get different voltage versions, and all these ones are replaced with other numbers. Very, very good. It's just got 3 connections. Plus 5 volts, 0 volts, and output. Isn't that amazing? You connect directly to the Arduino. I lied. You do need to have a pull-down resistor, no internal pull-up resistor in the Arduino, and then a 68k pull-down resistor basic to ground. Then it works. I do apologise profusely. So given some nice little drawings about how to fit it in the end of a plumbing fitting. How delightful. Oh, and the wonderful 3D printer. Let me stroke it. It's amazing. I was asked by a photographic company in London. They saw my advert for these shell lamps, and they said, "Ooh, would you mind, have you got time to make up 10 of them for next Tuesday? We have a photo shoot for an advert or something. And do you mind changing their design slightly?" I said, "Ooh, I do like a challenge." So that's what I did, and this thing, because each of the new shell lamps, the developed ones, took 8.5 hours to print. So this thing has been printing in brass filament for the last week, or several days, endlessly, all night, all day. It is an amazing machine, and now it's finished that, someone's placed an order for 10 of the servo. I used to advertise them on Etsy, but then I stopped because people kept ordering the wrong thing. It's a motorised gauge, like the Kraken gauge, but it's actually got a servo motor in it, so that you can accurately get it to display an actual figure, an actual measurement reading of some sort. I think I'm losing the plot a bit. I don't know where I am, because I'm making regular Facebook updates for the person who kindly ordered so many of the lovely one-off machines, and I'm getting on with all sorts of other things, and I'm so pleased about this. Got rid of that hideous amplifier that I was using with the telly that would always, it won't even focus because it's so rubbish. I hate it. And it was sort of early, well, not early, but 90s or 2000s digital. So every time I switched it on, it would have forgotten all the settings. What a joy. But look, dear friends, it's been resurrected. It's been sitting at an amateur dramatics loft for years since I last used it. This is a beautiful thing. I bought this when I was at Central School of Art and Design in the 80s. I've used it on and off ever since. When I used to do discos and things, I used to use this to amplify the sound for the tweeters and the mid-range, and then have a separate amplifier that this was feeding for the bass. And it never let me down. It's got a big handle on top, 2 speakers that sit on the side. It is beautiful, and I was always amazed and loved the logic behind the cassette controls, and it even did the different types of coating on the cassettes, and all these buttons that would, oh, it's a joy. And it's got real controls that slide. So I've just put it in, switched it on for the first time in years, and it's working beautifully. I can't tell you, because now I just switch it on and it'll work, and it brings me an awful lot of joy to see this lovely old bit of technology that is still working beautifully, having worked so well over the last however many years, 40 or something years. Amazing. Obviously, I'm also still trying to get Victoria the automaton to sing. I think there's a problem with this board. Either the Teensy audio board, which coincidentally you can't get for love nor money at the moment, anywhere practically in the world, they've all sold out, brilliant, or the Teensy underneath, because I thought, back to square one, follow the destructions, and there's a very good tutorial, lots of little bits to do, created by PJRC, whatever, Paul Suffragan, which leads you through how to set this up and get it all working and playing things. I get to lesson number 3, which is where it plays a WAV file that's stored on the SD card at the same time as flashing the LED to sort of show that it can multitask, so to speak, because it's so fast. That's where it stops working. I cannot get it. And I remember when I first started fiddling with it, I couldn't get it to work either. Now at that time you'd have thought, he should have realised there was something wrong. Why not stop and sort it out? But no, I struggled on and came up with all sorts of workarounds and things. But I think one of the pins, either this isn't compatible, it's an earlier version to the Teensy 4 I'm using with, or I keep dropping and smashing it, or I've mis-soldered or something. But I'm going to investigate the physicalness of it next. It's frustrating, but it's one of those things. So I'm doing that, getting ready to install some more exciting parts on the Climatic Revelator. In fact, lots of exciting parts. Look at these lovely windows. Ooh, balsa wood, a sprayed laser cut engraved piece of surround, and a disc of acrylic in the middle. It's a joy to glue together because you've got the guides, so you can just line it up on one side, drip a couple of bits of super glue in, and then once that's set you can just push the window in and glue that. It's one of those gluing jobs that makes me very happy. Oops, let me just turn my lovely heater off because it's probably going to drown me out. Who would have thought? There's a little workshop in Hendon years ago, and I had one of those as the source of heat in it. Who would have thought in 2023, with a lovely radiator and central heating system, I wouldn't be able to afford to run, and I'd be reverting just to use one of those to heat this room alone. Who would have thought? While the stinking, fat, huge, hideous energy companies such as Shell and all the rest who actually do the refining and things are raking it in, falsely inflating the cost of energy. Anyway, the side panels with the windows in are going to slot in here to allow the light to project through the scenes onto the mirror, blah 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 blah. Poor Ukulele Playing Machine. The great day of resurrection will come at some point. Oh yeah, I forgot that I'd broken the original one of those when I was working on that auto-tuning. Here's a new one, but I haven't had time to do anything with it. I will sit it there to remind me. And there's an issue with the new barometric prognosticator 3 that the customer has ordered, and which I coincidentally had one ready built. It wasn't displaying the right temperature, not by very much, but because it's been so freezingly cold, it's just started to sort of melt now. But it's been sort of -5, minus whatever. This hasn't gone below 0. That concerned me. So I've done lots of measurements and things, and I've now got the computer connected, and I'm waiting for this to receive a signal from the wireless temperature sensor that's outside, and it'll tell me so I can actually read what it's going to say. Obviously it hasn't done it because I wanted to video it. It came up here and this actually said 1.7, so I know that all the complicated mathematics and the stepper motors and all the rest of it are working perfectly. It is a problem with the wireless weather monitor, so I'm getting on with that as well. I'm happy with the way this fits on because it's got a 12mm diameter shaft turned from brass with 2 threaded eels for grub screws, and it's one of those sort of catch-22 things. There's a bearing with internal diameter 12 there just to provide extra support, because this is what's going to run the ball chain. Probably not necessary, but why not? So it's supported there, and then obviously where the little stepper motor is. And the way I ended up figuring it out is by having a hole drilled here, and I can drop the grub screws on once I've pushed it through the bearing, and then tighten them against the motor's drive shaft. How lovely. And then twisting it around gently a few times just to line it up. I made the holes extra big for the 2 screws so I can get it all nice and lined up, nice and loose, and then tighten them and lock it all into place. I thank you very much. It is so enjoyable following the instructions to make a thing. Look at this beautiful thing. It's got springs, it's got bearings. Can you see what it is yet? Look at those beautiful. I love the way these turn because they're bearing pulleys and they just catch the light as they spin. It looks absolutely beautiful. Brass, steel, oh, it's a joy. It's the tensioner. As the ball chain comes off the pulley from the motor, it needs to be tensioned because obviously it's not springy, and this just keeps it under tension just enough so it keeps binding or engaging with the pulleys. I was just wondering where to find the measurements to line all this up, and look what I found. It just gets better and better. Climatic Revelator's tensioner lining up jig. I had the foresight, and it just, look, it slots in there, and then I know to mark out the holes here. Look at that. That's amazing. It's all too much for words. I'll get that done. Every time I do this, I come up with better ways of doing it. Now, here are the 3 things that I use to support the wonderful little PIR sensor. There's the standard plumbing fitting. I then glue that on the front, and it's too small so it slops around. Try and line it up and use some araldite to stick that, and then this is too small and sits in there, and then I use some more araldite which regularly spills a squeeze out the front and have to do it again. This time, however, I thought, hang on a minute, is there room for 2 layers, well, 2 rings of a heat shrink tube? Sure enough there was. Obviously a little dab of super glue before shrinking it, and now I can push that really firmly into this middle one and it'll be completely perfectly centered. Thank you. And it just so happens that the PR sensor just pushes beautifully into these. These are eyelets. I don't know which size they are. Eyelets for fabric. The idea being that if you want a hole in some fabric, can't think why, like sort of tarpaulin and things, although these wouldn't be suitable for that. But you have 2 halves. That's from one side. You get the other half that goes on the back, and then they stamp together with some sort of tool to make a nice fray-proof hole. Luckily, a little bit of a 3x3 square of Veraboard perfectly fits on the back and just leaves room for the 68k resistor and connecting the 3 wires. How lovely. I think someone is trying to tell me something. Yes, walkies time, I think. Oh, and by the way, because this is obviously a static sensitive device, you really don't want to, you can destroy it easily if you walk across the room and get charged up with your lovely nylon or synthetic fabric clothing, and then you touch the pins and unbeknownst to you, all the electronics inside is fried. So, to take the precautions, I held it up in a piece of blue tack, carefully touching the stand, the metal stand of the soldering iron, because the soldering iron heater is earthed. So by touching that with both hands and the bag and all the rest before I start, and then not doing a dance or shuffling around the room or anything, it should be okay. And then after I finish soldering it, I'll just wind all the wires together so that there's no chance that it can get any high voltages while I'm installing it or anything. I thank you very much. Stop! It's 9 days since I released the last video. It is ludicrous, I tells you. I've got to stop doing this and actually make the video. Thanks very much for watching, if you still are. Please remember to subscribe and like and all the other bits and pieces. If you've got any questions or queries or want any help with your incredible inventions, do get in touch in the comments. Hope to see you next time. Thanks again.